Okay, we're being recorded. It's Thursday, November the 19th, and the welcome SCCC South Campus Cisco cohort. And I'm going to run through this 10.8.2 lab on Cisco Discovery Protocol, Link Layer Discovery Protocol, and Network Time Protocol. And due to Network Time Protocol taking about 4 or 5 minutes to come in effect, I'm going to jump ahead and do some of that first. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and configure the IP addresses on all these ports. My favorite technique is to just give each device a host name, and if it's a router port, do a no shutdown on it. You don't have to put any IP addresses on it. And then we can do show CDP neighbors to prove they work, and that's actually one of the objectives of today's lab. 3 devices, I only have 2 console ports, so my first console port is connected to the router. And we'll go to the privileged exec mode. Start rolling, yeah, we're rolling good. I'll do a show startup configuration. There's no startup configuration present here. So this router is supposed to, oh yeah, sorry, I'm going to do this configure terminal and go ahead and give them a host name first. And then interface loopback 0, interface loopback 1. And that's supposed to be IP address, T, interface loopback 1, IP address 172.16.1.1/24. And loopback ports automatically are up and up. You don't have to do the no shutdown command. Then interface port G0/0. Gotcha, number 1 on this for you guys in the lab. Our routers are G0/0. The newer 4000 series routers are G0/0/0 and 1. If you're doing it on packet tracer at home, you can provision a 4000 series router, and the interface port numbering scheme will be just perfect. So I'll go ahead and do a no shutdown on it and give an IP address. It's supposed to be 10.22.0.1/24. Okay, how about a show IP interface brief, just to make sure I didn't forget nothing. So 10.22.0.1 is, what is it down and down for? Did I forget to plug a plug in here? G00? I miswired it. I'll put them in the right place. There we go. That should cause them to come up and up. And the loopback 1 is 172.16.1.1, and my favorite alternate command for this is show prot, which not only shows you the IP address, but the slash number as well. If you mistop the IP address, show IP interface brief will not show that to you because it only shows you the network number. Show prot, not show IP prot, which is the one we normally use, but show protocol. Show protocol, show prot for short. So it's a quick and easy. Also gives you the interface port numbering scheme. If you're at a new router, you don't know what number the interfaces are. These ports here are the 4-port add-in card that our routers have that turn it into take a $1,000 Cisco router and turn them into a $50 Linksys style router. I'm going to go ahead and apply the command for the NTP time on this one because I'm going to have to pull the wire loose, the console cable loose from the router and plug to the switch to configure those, and that way I shouldn't have to come back and do anything extra on the router. Okay, so I'm going to go to the configuration mode and say NTP master, and the question mark here is what is the stratum number. The lower the stratum number, the more authoritative and more sophisticated the time server is, and he says to use 4. Typical number you might use within your own enterprise. Now I'm going to swing my cable. And check to make sure these 2 switches are completely unconfigured, and then we can go and start using them. Okay, I'm going to assess switch. We'll go to the privileged exec mode and do the directory command. And I'm looking for the one thing it would cost me to have to reload the switch and reset it, the presence of a VLAN.dat file. It's not there. If I do show startup, it has no startup configuration. So this switch is cool. The only thing we would have to worry about in this switch is if we were applying any IP version 6 addresses, we'd have to do that switch to database manager thing, but it's not required in this lab. It's all IP version 4. Okay, I'm going to apply the addresses for this particular switch. And I'll give it a host name first. Go to the global configuration mode. Name S1 really on S1, aren't I? I think I'm really on S1. In this particular lab, you can mix them up, it'll still work. You can't do that on most labs. Okay, I give it a host name, and I'll give it an IP address. I'll say interface VLAN 1 and IP address 10.22.0.2. That's a /24. And let's do a no shutdown on the management port. And then we're supposed to have IP default gateway command. It actually would work without that in this lab because everybody's in the same broadcast domain, everybody's in the same subnet. But go back to the configuration mode. IP default gateway is 10.22.0.1. Specified. And then we're supposed to do like line console 0 password Cisco login, and then line VTY 0 through 15 password Cisco login. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the second switch. Here's to be an erase switch. We're going to double check with DIR, double check with show start. Here's to be no previous configuration. Hostname S2. Interface VLAN 1. IP address is 10.22.0.3. Did not shut down. Line console 0. Login. Password. Oops. Try it again. Sometimes when you don't go right back. Here we go. Line console 0. Password Cisco. Login. Line VTY 0 through 15. Password Cisco. Login. Oh, I should do enable secret class. You don't have a enable password set. You can't remotely connect. Now let's check and see if we have some connectivity here. Can I ping? Oh, I didn't do the IP default gateway in this one. I'll do that one. Configure terminal. IP default gateway 10.22.0.1, I think it was. And can I ping it? 10.22.0.1. Well, that worked. Now can I ping my next neighbor switch? That works too. Okay, good. Now what I like to do whenever doing these labs is before you even apply any IP addresses, just go to the device that's in the middle. In this case, S1's in the middle of the topology. And let's do a show CDP neighbor. CDP is on by default. So we can see that switch 1 is connected to switch 2, port 1 to 1. We can see that switch 1 is connected to the router port from switch's fast Ethernet 05 connection to the switch's 0. Oh dear, did I do the wrong number?
It's on the same interface, so it's probably.
I did it on the. Oh, it is supposed to be the 1. It is supposed to be 1. I misconfigured the router. It'll still work though. I'll just leave it that way. I should have configured the router with G001, G01. I did it with G00. That's why I swung the wire over. I cannot connect it the wrong way. It still should work just fine. That shouldn't affect it. Good morning. We're taping, and then I'll help you guys get going. Okay, so we have IP connectivity between all 3 devices. And I already did the NTP master command on the router, and that should be good enough to get to it. And so I'm showing show CDP. And CDP, if you do show CDP neighbor on the device, it gives you a brief summary. If you go CDP neighbor detail, you get a lot of extra information, like what's the IP address of that device? Well, I want to telnet into that device. That would give you the address to telnet or secure shell into. So show a Cisco Discovery Protocol is very good for internally within our company to look at this stuff. There's a question toward the end of the lab, why should you not configure CDP on a interface that goes to the outside of the company, like your IT or ISP or managed service provider? Well, they could That's from your private trusted internal network to the untrusted external network, and they could possibly get in there and discover what version of iOS you're running, and if they were a bad guy and they figure out it's a early iOS with a vulnerability of some sort, they could maybe break into your system. Now I'm going to skip ahead slightly and control the two switches to do the, then we'll come back and do the LLDP. I'm going to go to the switch configuration mode and say NTP server, and that was a 10.0.22.1, wasn't it? That's the router. 10.22.0.1 is our time server. And it takes about 5 minutes for that to work. I'm going to do this now, and then we can come back after we do LLDP and see if we get some sort of sync. Because if I do the command now, show NTP status, it says it's unsynchronized. It'll take it a few minutes to do that. I'll do the same thing on switch 2, give them a chance to get caught up. Configure terminal, NTP server, 10.0, 10.22. We already proved we had IP connectivity on those devices. If we do the same thing to him, show NTP status, he's unsynchronized. Okay, now let's go back and do the link layer discovery protocol, which is like Cisco discovery protocol in concept. And it was an open source thing that came later, because Cisco discovery protocol only works with Cisco to Cisco devices, Cisco routers and switches and access points and things of that nature. So link layer discovery protocol is open standard. It works with all the vendors supported. It's not a proprietary type of a thing. It's off by default on most Cisco devices, so we'll need to enable it. So if I type show LLDP right now, it's going to say it's not enabled. So I'll go to the configuration mode and say LLDP run. Oops, LLDP run. Do the same thing on switch 2, give them a chance to start up. Configure terminal. LLDP run. You can do the same thing with Cisco discovery protocol. It's on by default. If you don't want it running at all on the whole device, say no LLDP run. Or if it's the case of you're using it internally for your phones and such, you can take that interface that goes to your managed service provider, ISP, and you could do a no CDP enable on that individual port and still leave it running with your company. So if this is running, it takes a minute for show for it to sync up. Show LLDP neighbors. And I have S1 and S2 showing. Why is it not showing on the router? Oh, I didn't enable LLDP on the router, did I? So it's not going to show that to me. So if I go to the second one, show LLDP neighbors, and you can see the report looks very similar to the Cisco Discovery Protocol report. It tells you what port number is on the local device. In this case, port 0/1 is connected to the port 0/1 on the other switch. So that's LLDP. And maybe enough time has elapsed now where our network time protocol is going to be working. So I'm going to go back and let's show the NTP status. Still unsynchronized. It usually takes about 5 minutes. Show NTP status. Now, if we do a show NTP associations, he knows that the address is 10.22.0.1. He can see that. But it takes a while for the clock to catch up. There's no reference clock at the present time. I'm going to take my S2 and swing it to router R1 and go ahead and turn on LLDP from my possibly technical table. So here I am back at the router. And we'll go to the privilege exec mode, and we'll go to the configure terminal mode, and we'll do LLDP run. I misspelled it. And then if I do a show LLDP neighbor, it'll take a second for it to come up, but he should pick up that S1 switch in a little bit. There it is. He's got it. So the S1 switch is connected to this router through the G00. I am non-compliant with the lab. I should have used G0/1. And it goes to port 5 on the switch, which is the way it's actually wired. Let's go back and do a show NTP status. Still unsynchronized. It usually takes about 5 minutes, and it hasn't been quite that long. So they tell you in the lab it could take a few minutes. And in my experience, it's taken about 4 or 5 minutes. If you guys have done this on Packet Tracer, a Packet Tracer even simulates the delay before it will come into effect. It does work on Packet Tracer. This lab works perfectly fine. Packet Tracer, I did that on the last lecture for Tuesday. That's part of that recorded presentations thing. I anticipate that it will become synchronized real soon now, because when we do the show NTP associations, you can see the clock is in the initiation stage. It hasn't quite locked up yet. I'm going to unplug my S1, plug it back to the switch, make sure that the switch. What's going on with the other switch? Show NTP associations is being associated. The clock is still in the initiation stage. So if I do show NTP stat, let's say unsynchronized. But it will become synchronized here in just a few moments. Okay, so I've covered that good. I will stop the recording. Oops, float over the right thing.